here. In a small town living rough, times were hard and life was tough. On the porch we'd find our peace, talking about the land of the free. Stars and stripes in the sky, blue and red lines standing high. But beneath the freedom's call lies the story of us all. A conversation with the mutts, just a whisper in our thoughts, talking about the dreams we chase in this vast American space. The roads we walk, they're cracked and dry, still we look up at the sky with hope that never dies and tears that fill our eyes. Thunderstorms and desert plains, echoes of our joys and pains. From the heartland to the coast, it's the simple things we toast. The conversation with the mutts, just a whisper in our thoughts, talking about the dreams we chase in this vast American space. We walk, they're cracked and dry, still we look up at the sky with hope that never dies and tears that fill our eyes. They're fast American space. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to A Conversation with the Mutts. I'm your host, the Celtic Mutt.
And I am Mrs. Mutt.
And tonight we are going to discuss Molly Pitcher and the women of the Revolutionary War.
Yes.
So I'm going to let you start since this was your topic that you picked. I did learn quite a bit from this, though, I will admit.
Yeah. I learned a bit when I did the reenacting. Unfortunately, it was only 2 events, but I had a ball doing it, and I learned quite a bit through that, and it got my curiosity going. So,
now, the question is, where did the term Molly Pitcher come from? And I actually found a brief description. The phrase Molly Pitcher likely originated from the actions of campers or camp women, particularly women like Molly, like Mary Ludwig Hayes, who brought water to soldiers and even took over their husbands' positions on cannons during the Battle of Mammoth in 1778.
Well, I'm sure it happened more than just that particular battle.
I have one of the ladies that I looked up was 1776. So yeah, it wasn't just that one battle.
Right.
But this was the description. By the way, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be reading over personally are from AI overviews, to be honest. But from various sites, but they are all AI overviews.
Now, I've got one or two that might be AI overviews, but I've also got actually going to the websites.
Right.
Now, you mentioned Hayes.
Yes.
And I do show that, and they say that it became Molly Pitcher which pitcher is spelled like pitcher of water, because the soldiers would holler out Molly pitcher because they were thirsty, or the cannon was overheating and they needed to cool it quickly. So
I get this image of Molly running, scooping up water, handing them a pitcher, and then them just slinging it onto the down the barrel of the cannon.
As a reenactor, when I was reenacting, what we did, it was not uncommon to see the Mollies on the field with, I believe it was canvas that we used. I may be wrong.
Canvas bags.
Hand-sewn little canvas bags with wine bottles.
I believe it.
Or wine, that style of bottle.
Right.
That we put in the bags. We often had them crisscrossed over us, over our chest.
Right.
And we had those filled with water because we were doing these reenactments in summer. And the guys would get just as thirsty during the reenactments as they did during the actual battles.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, yeah, we, the guys would say, hey, I need. And we'd hand off our bottle.
I believe it. I mean, I know a lot of those uniforms were either a heavier cotton or in many cases even wool. And that we're trying to wear that in the summer.
They were wool. Those coats were wool.
That cannot have been a comfortably cool afternoon.
No. And the theory, yes, there's a couple of women that they attribute the possibility of being the original Molly pitcher. You were talking about Hayes. I came across a woman by the last name of Corbin.
I actually did Corbin.
Right.
Margaret Corbin.
Corbin, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I always come up with the first name Hannah for her, and I don't know exactly how that works.
Unless it's two different people, but I
they
didn't.
Had them both. Granted, your Hayes and Corbin were both at Monmouth. So was Hannah.
Well,
so I'm thinking that Hannah and Margaret were both.
Margaret Cochran Corbin. I didn't run across where she was at Mammon. She was actually at the Battle of Fort Washington in 1976, and that's where she was wounded and actually left the field. So
now I've got Hayes right here.
Well, I'm not saying Hayes. I was talking about Margaret Corbin.
Okay, I have. Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make sure I got the right. I've got Margaret Corbin in the same artillery regiment as Mary Ludwig Hayes,
the 35th Pennsylvania,
Captain Francis Proctor in the 1st Company of the Pennsylvania Artillery.
Okay, well, and that was in 1778.
Well, let me put it this way:
long story short, folks. This is how confusing trying to figure out who the myth, whether it was myth or a conglomeration, as it was.
Right. That's the other theory. Is a
conglomeration of different people,
yes.
different women, because I have Margaret Cochran Corbin,
and I've got Margaret Corbin.
Now and
her husband's name was John.
See that's where it gets confusing. I even ran across
Captain Molly.
Yep, that was Captain Molly.
But
see, it said in what I found that she was wounded here.
I have that she got wounded. Yeah.
Well, hold on. One of them. This is what the thing that I've found said. Again, this is an AI overview. One of the most famous Molly pictures was Captain Molly, which was given to her by the women of the camp, actually, because she was so abrasive and so in her personality that they just started calling her Captain Molly. Margaret Cochrane Corbin, a Revolutionary War hero who became the first woman to receive a military pension from the United States after her heroical firing of a cannon after her husband John was killed in the Battle of Fort Washington on November. This is even the date that they used, November 16th, 1776. She continued firing it until she herself was shot and wounded. Her wounds were so severe, and this is why I have a hard time thinking she was at Mammoth 2 years later. Her wounds were so severe that she likely lost the arm and had to live with caregivers for the rest of her life.
Okay.
Due to her disabling injuries.
Let me address that.
Okay.
What I have here, and this is from archives.gov.
Right.
Okay. When John Corbin was killed, let me back up. First of all, another reason why she may have been referred to as Captain Molly.
Right.
The historian that they spoke to here, Linda Grant DePaul.
Right.
She actually describes Mark as a transvestite soldier who wore a uniform but made no attempt to conceal her gender, her sex. At the Battle of Fort Washington, when John was killed, Margaret took his place immediately on the firing line.
Right.
And was wounded in the engagement with the British. Captured by the British, she was subsequently released and reassigned to the invalids at point, performing guard duty.
Yeah, she was. She,
Okay.
Yeah, she did go to. Yeah, she did go to. She actually moved back home to Highland Falls, New York, which is about 3 miles from West Point.
Okay, well.
So that tracks, is what I'm saying. That does track.
Her name is also listed on the discharge rolls of the Invalid Regiment rolls for April 1783. These events demonstrate that the military recognized Margaret Corbin as a regular soldier and treated her as such. Furthermore, officers from her regiment petitioned successfully for Corbin to receive both state and federal pensions the same year.
Yep.
On July 6th, 1779, the Continental Congress resolved that Margaret Corbin, who was wounded and disabled in the attack on Fort Washington, whilst she heroically filled the post of her husband, who was killed by her side serving a piece of artillery, do receive during her natural life or the continuance of the said disability the 1/2 of the monthly pay drawn by a soldier in the service of the states,
which was $50, which today would be $1,301 per month.
Now, is that hers or is that what the men would get?
That was hers.
Okay.
Hers was $50 a month, which it tracked out today, and I looked that up. It's $1,301.93. There we go.
And that she now receive out of the public stores 1 complete suit of clothes or the value thereof in money. After the war, the invalid Margaret moved in straitened circumstances in Westmoreland County She died at the age of 48
Mhm.
on January 16th, 1800,
Yep.
as a result of her war injuries.
Yep. And now here's something that I found interesting.
Mhm.
In 1926, her remains were moved from an obscure grave along the Hudson River to West Point, where she was buried with full military honors. Her bravery during the battle earned her the nickname Captain Molly, and made her the first woman, like you were just saying, the first woman in the United States to receive a military pension in 1779. So all the numbers track.
I thought it was awesome that the men of her regiment petitioned for that.
Yep. And I believe Washington even spoke on her behalf, from one of the articles I read. This is where I was talking about the other reason why she was called Molly Pitcher. This is what the history.com. Her forceful personality earned her the nickname Captain Molly from the other women. And on November 16th, 1776, while at Fort Washington, the British attacked, and John Corbin, who was on the cannon crew, was killed, as we've already established. Now, that was in 1776. They had only been married for 4 years at that time. They were in 1772. I do have a little bit more on her if you're interested.
I might take a look at that later.
Yeah.
I just saw this.
Okay.
There was, and he actually was at Monmouth. This is Private Joseph Plum Martin.
Okay.
He does not say who the woman was. It says this substantiates Molly Pitcher was more than just a legend. He actually, kept a war diary.
Okay.
In it, he described how during the battle he had observed a woman firing cannon. And it's a rather amusing story. Let me read this little excerpt. A woman whose husband belonged to the artillery and who was then attached to a piece in the engagement, attending with her husband at the piece for the whole time, while in the act of reaching a cartridge and having one of her feet as far before the other as she could step, a cannon shot from the enemy passed directly between her legs without doing any other damage than carrying away all of the lower part of her petticoat. Bye-bye skirts.
Yeah, basically.
Looking at it with apparent unconcern, she observed that it was lucky it did not pass a little higher, for in that case it might have carried away something else, and continued her occupation.
Now that's kind of that kind of strikes me as fitting, considering this is
famous quote.
Well, her famous quote: "You may be a soldier, John Corbin, but I'm your wife, and my place is at your side."
Now I've got another quote that is.
I can just picture her saying that, when he's getting ready to leave.
I've got another quote that is attributed.
Okay.
To. Let me see if I can find it. Where'd it go?
I can just picture, that running through her head as she's sitting there loading this cannon after he's been killed, and she's sitting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And just the irony in that statement.
It was something very close to. Well, it could have been worse.
Okay.
Yeah, and they didn't. It wasn't an exact quote, but yeah, it was something close to. Well, it could have been worse.
Oh wow. Now Molly was so ingrained into that situation that she actually has some honorariums, memorial and legacy memorial to on the grounds of the United States Military Academy at West Point, and the Academy has named the Corbin Women's Leadership Forum after her.
So hold on a second. They moved Hayes, or they moved Corbin
Corbin.
to West Point.
Corbin.
Okay.
They moved Molly Corbin.
Molly
Did I say Hayes?
I was making sure. I don't recall because we've talked about both.
No,
so.
I'm referring to Corbin.
Okay.
I didn't look much on Hayes at all.
That's okay. I've got.
I looked up
Hayes.
everything. I looked up was on Corbin.
Okay. I had forgotten that.
Yep.
That's what we had.
Now the artillery order. This is by the Field Artillery Association, which, for those of you who don't know, my father was a member. My father was an artilleryman, so this kind of struck me as ironic when I was reading this. I was like, oh, my dad's fingerprints are all over this story.
Your dad must have inspired me to pick this topic so that we dealt with the artillery.
It's possible. It's called. There are two of them. The Order of Molly Pitcher recognizes those individuals who have voluntarily contributed significant and meaningful ways to the improvement of the field artillery community. Okay. And then there's the esteemed Artillery Order of Molly Pitcher. Now, that was the first one was the Order of Molly Pitcher. This is the Esteemed Order of Molly Pitcher, and there's a slight difference. The Esteemed Order of Molly Pitcher, Pitcher recognizes those individuals who have given a career of voluntary service to the field artillery and mentored junior level spouses along the way. They have also shared the spirit of Molly Pitcher with the rest of the military and the world at large. Yep. So that's there. Those are actual honorariums that she actually, or tributes, I guess would be the better word for them. Now, you wanted me to look up the rations. Was there a reason for that?
Well, just to discuss a little bit of the conditions and the life. Because, for example, I wanted to touch on the fact, the men were in their wool coats, and I don't remember what their breeches were made out of, but they were not dressed for hot weather.
No, they definitely weren't.
These women weren't either. They were wearing their chemise, which essentially shift similar to a nightgown.
Okay.
A lightweight nightgown. Then you have your corset. You don't move well in these. You don't breathe. Well, while I was doing a reenactment, we were talking one day, several of us, and one of the girls mentioned that somebody had dropped an ice cube. They were all playing around and joking. Somebody had put an ice cube down her
corset.
Yeah, down her corset. She ended up almost getting frostbite
Wow.
in the middle of Wisconsin or Midwest summer because it held that against her with no airflow.
Ooh. Ooh.
It doesn't melt very well, and it was obviously extremely cold being held against her skin.
I would imagine, yeah.
On top of that, you're wearing
I still would have thought it would have melted, but
very slowly. On top of that, you're wearing if you walk around wearing your corset without something over it, that's the equivalent of you walking around in just your bra. So you're wearing something over the top of that.
I would imagine, yeah, you would
A
have
bodice.
to. Yeah, a
Yeah.
bodice, yeah.
You're wearing essentially thigh-high tights. And no, you're not wearing garter belts. They didn't have them.
Darn it. Anyway.
And you're wearing 2 skirts, generally. Plus, you've got at least a mob cap on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're not dressed real light. And that bodice is at least down to your elbows, plus your apron.
So you've got on several layers.
Yes. In what can be 100-degree heat.
That's crazy. That is absolutely insane.
Now, if you'd like to tell them what a man got for his rations, well, a soldier.
I've got both, actually. The men, I titled this, just in my notes, I titled it Rations Men versus Women. During the Revolutionary War, Continental Army soldiers' field rations typically included a pound of bread or flour, a pound of beef, pork, or salt fish, and wait a minute, hold on, and a quart of beer or cider, along with a smaller amount of peas, beans, or vegetables. Now that was the men. The women, during the Revolutionary War, women accompanying the Continental Army received a half ration of food, typically consisting of a half pound of meat or fish or pork, a half pound of flour or bread in exchange for their labor. It didn't say anything about the veggies or the beer or the cider.
Basically,
they gave them half.
Yeah.
They got a half ration, basically.
And the kids had a little extra incentive to behave themselves, and generally the parents didn't have to worry about telling them, if you don't behave, you're going to go to bed without supper. The kids got a quarter of the men's ration if they behaved.
Right.
Now, on top of that, as far as the women, this is an order from Washington. I knew it was a military order. I didn't realize it came down from Washington himself.
Okay.
This is something I was discussing with you the other day. When the company marched and they had to go through town, the men got to march down the center of town. The women and children, no. They didn't even get to go a few roads over. They had to go through go around the edge, which a small town, no big deal. But imagine having to do that going to Philadelphia or New York or DC, something like that. I mean, I realize they're not decided on now, but
and
if
I looked at it differently than you did. I looked at it from the standpoint of, okay, I can see the men marching down.
right, I can get the point.
Hold on, let me finish, please.
Mhm.
Think about it this way, though. If you've got the women, say, let's for the sake of discussion, say that the men march through, then the women march through behind them. They come through behind them with the children. Can you imagine the psychological effect if, say, you've got, and you've got to remember that a lot of these towns at that point were under British control. Let's say that there's a regiment, or not even a full regiment, not even a full company. It would only take a sniper or two in some of those buildings to be taking crack shots at the women and children.
Which that's what Coco was just pointing out.
You know, they would take a crack shot, and I'm sorry, I'm not watching this. I'm over here on the backside taking care of stuff back here, so right. I'm not looking at the screen.
Chat.
Right. Could you imagine the psychological effect that would have on the men to watch their wives and children be shot? So I can understand Washington's rationale.
Right.
Now you're looking at it. As I understood it, you were looking at it as a fairness thing. Whereas I don't think that was what his mindset was. I think his mindset was the women are. We had them go out and around with the children. They were going to be far safer than the men would be if a fight broke out in the center of town.
I was not looking at it as for their safety. You're right. I was looking at it as these women are serving, not in the same way necessarily, but they are still serving. They're doing
they're doing this.
They're serving because they're taking care of the, forgive the term, housekeeping for what needs to, the background work for what needs to be done.
You also have to look at it from the from this point. All right, now, admittedly, a lot of these women were taking care of the wounded.
Yes, they were.
And okay,
they were also on the battlefield, not just pretending, or but
well,
they were.
Hold on. Let me make my point before I lose it, please. Think about it this way. MASH units, Army hospital, military hospital. They're not put in. They're usually further back behind enemy or behind friendly lines. Okay, there's a reason for that. The men in those units
are already injured.
They're already injured. They're less likely to be able to fight at full capacity. Plus, doctors and nurses are more concerned about the patients than they are trying to fight off the enemy.
Right.
So they're going to keep them further back to keep them safer. And I honestly believe that was Washington's rationale. That plus the psychological effect of watching, your wife and children get butchered by redcoats.
Well,
I think
Washington didn't mixed feelings about having the women in the camps, period.
Well, I can understand that.
I understand. He didn't want them there, but he understood that they were, for lack of a better way to put it,
unnecessary evil.
Yeah, and necessarily evil. Unnecessarily evil. Unnecessary. Ugh,
necessary.
Evil. Coco, when you get a chance to go into the chat.
I'm in here now.
Okay, she's saying to make field artillery a mod. She says it's Carl.
Field artillery. I'm not seeing field artillery in the. I'm over on the StreamYard side.
He's in YouTube, and I don't know. First of all, I'm not
Hold on. I'm on the. Give me a minute, and I will happily do that. Give me just a second here. I've got like 6 windows. I've got like 6 windows in the background open. I'm sorry. Give me just a second. I don't want to
another thing,
inadvertently close down the.
In addition, and I don't know if you know this, but in addition to when the women are on the battlefield, not only are they doing things such as keeping the men hydrated and playing nurse to the wounded on the battlefield, and I'm assuming helping, of course, to get them off.
Give me just one moment, honey. I'm going to go into the chat. Excuse me, folks. I'm actually getting ready to make Carl a mod, but if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I muted that because I don't want to. McGregor's in there.
Yep. We got Mac, Coco, and Carl.
There he is. Okay.
And we got a couple of others.
Hold on a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to. I don't want to do either one of those. It's not going to. Seriously, you're not going to let me. Oddly enough, it's not letting me. I know how to do the mod thing, but it's not letting me do it.
This is going to sound stupid, but are you under the right?
Yes, dear.
Okay.
I'm in the chat on StreamYard side, and I am trying to make. But it's only telling me I only have 2 options. I can either block him or report him, and I don't want to do either one of those things, and I don't understand why it's not letting me do that.
You don't need to be in YouTube.
I'm on you. That's what I'm saying. I'm on you. I am on YouTube, dear.
Well, you just said you were in.
I came over, and now it's not letting me. We'll have to figure it out, but I will happily make him a mod a little later once I figure out what's going on. I don't quite know why it's not letting me do that, but we're losing track of where we are at this point. Give me a moment here. Why?
Can I go ahead and continue my thought?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. As I was saying, in addition to keeping the men hydrated and taking care of the wounded on the field and presumably getting them off the battlefield, the women would also scavenge. If somebody went down, they were going to take what they could off the person that went down. If it was someone on our side that could not get back up, of course. If it was someone on the other side, whether they could get up or not, you were gonna take what you could to help our side. So that was just another thing, another duty that they fulfill.
Go ahead, honey. I'm still trying to figure.
There was actually, I thought this was interesting. I think it's back over. Yes. There was actually, we had talked, you and I had both mentioned, what's her last name? Deborah
Sampson.
Yes. Deborah Sampson, who disguised herself as a man so that she could fight on the battlefield. And she went by the name of Robert Shirtliff. And the only reason that she was found out to be ineligible, shall we say, to be on the battlefield in that capacity, she became ill. Well, this particular article, and again, this is archives.gov, is saying she could have been the original Molly Pitcher.
Or she could have been, I suppose.
They said that because of her smooth complexion and high-pitched voice, her fellow soldiers had nicknamed her Molly. So that's another theory.
Sorry, folks. I'm back. I'll have. I'm not sure why it's not letting me do that. Yeah, there have been several occasions where, or not occasions, there were several articles that I glanced at, that I kind of skimmed over, that said it could have been
any number of,
either any number of, or as I said earlier, an amalgamation of a number of different women. But Molly Pitcher did become the quote unquote unofficial nickname for women who fought on the battlefield during the Revolutionary War. So, I mean, it's...
A lot of people don't realize there were waiting lists of women who wanted to be in those camps to help. And there were, even like Martha Washington and several other prominent women, oh, you silly, such as Catherine Green and Lucy Knox. They actually husbands while at camp. However, because they were of a higher social status, these women lived in relatively comfortable settings instead of the canvas tents that the
there's definitely
men were
a caste difference.
Oh, of course. They were usually in homes located near the camps.
Right.
What they often did is, while they were with their husbands, they hosted dinner parties and other events for the Army's generals and officers. And many times when they did this, they were fundraising to support the military. Now, one of the reasons why the camp women were, shall we say, less than popular,
right,
or discouraged from becoming camp followers, was because the resources for our military were already depressed, shall we say.
One second. Carl, if you're still in the chat, which I hope you are, you've just been made a mod. I figured out what the issue was. It helps when you're trying to make somebody a mod to be on the correct YouTube channel. I was on Mutts American Crime trying to make him a mod for Conversation with the Mutts. That doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. That does not work. There we go. But yes, he will now be a mod. So there we go. Sorry about the confusion on that. That has been taken care of. Yeah, I
Is
forgot.
that the equivalent of looking for your glasses and they're on the top of your head?
Yeah, basically, yes, basically that's what just happened with Mutt. He was looking for his glasses and they were on top of his. No, that's the equivalent of they're on your face. You're wearing them.
Looking for your phone and you're talking on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 100%. Yes. Okay. There we go. I think we're good now.
I know I forgot what.
I'm sorry. I did not mean to get us off track, ladies and gentlemen. But these things
Start my brain so I remember where I was at, please.
You were discussing Molly and the different. We were talking about the different. I had mentioned the different collaboration, the amalgamations, and then you went on with in a different vein.
Well, I talked about Deborah.
Right.
And I talked about I talked about the difference between like Martha and the upper class and upper echelon and what they were doing and where they were staying.
Mac, you're not the reason that you were not the reason we added my sir.
That was
there were red glitter bomb situations that were mentioned towards me, if you catch my meaning. And I don't need any red glitter bomb situations involving an inebriated individual. I'll just leave it at that and just won't go there any further than that.
Oh, I think I know.
Okay.
Yeah, so the camp women, they were looked down upon because the resources were already meager that they had to rely on to supply the Continental Army. So what we had available to feed our men was not just going for the men. It was going for the women and the children.
See, that's I don't understand the concept of bringing your children. This isn't a. You're not going on a weekend camping trip. You're going into a war zone. Why are you bringing your children?
Because you want to support the war effort. You want to support your husband. It may be a case of your husband saying to you, "You're going to go with me. You're going to go so you can do my laundry, so you can do this for me and that for me and what have you." And it may not have been her choice. And if that's the case, you may not have been able to hand your children off to somebody, or
I suppose
for whatever reason, may not have been willing to do that. And I agree, that's not a place for children.
I mean, I don't know. Just that to me just seems illogical, asinine. And so I don't know. It just, I couldn't imagine. That would be like me bringing, well, now I'd bring Tyler because he'd probably do better than I would. But
Tyler, at the age she is now, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Tyler 10, 15 years ago, not so much.
No. That to me is mind blowing that they would even.
if you have to, like I was saying, you have to remember, you have to keep in mind that this was 250 roughly years ago.
Right.
These men are not willing to. Many cannot because they do not know how to cook, clean, wash clothes, things like that.
I would go more than not willing to. I wouldn't say they didn't know how to. I might go with
I'm doubting that mom taught them, that dad was teaching them to possibly hunt or a job, a skill to get a job if they lived in the city.
You're not wrong, Coco. They were different. I just, I don't know. These are the kinds of conversations that Mrs. Mutt and I have fairly frequently.
And this is something, we actually talked about because of what we were reading in my English class. We have to look at it and remember, we can't look at time, people so many years, hundreds of years ago, and judge them by our morality now.
Right. Yeah. Times were different. Social standings were different.
Mores have changed.
Yeah, exactly. The mores have changed. Morals are not exactly what they were. So
and so many of us, for example, bash people.
Right.
In
Coco put it well. Back then, men were men and women were women.
Yes.
Nowadays, men want to be women and women want to be men, and that's just a backwards. That's
some, not all.
Not all. No, we are definitely.
No, I'm saying the way I am.
Yeah. We are definitely the men were men, women were women.
Yeah. But that's just like going back to, even before at this time period, we can't judge them for slavery.
No,
that was the way that they lived. That was how what their economy was based on.
Yeah, that was a large part of it.
That was a lot of so many things, and we can't just go, they were horrible people, they shouldn't have, things were so very much different.
Right. Mindset. That's what I was looking for. That was the phrase I was looking for. Mindsets were very much different than they are now.
Yes.
So,
and if they were to look at us today with our morality in some ways, would we get raked over the coals?
Yeah. Yep. For example, look at the way you're dressed tonight. Now, she is dressed modestly, but she's in a man's shirt. It is a man's shirt, and she's wearing a vest right now. Now, she looks she looks good. Don't get me wrong.
When he says a vest, it technically is a man's vest. It had been something we were looking at for the ceremony, and unfortunately it
was too small.
We did not look at the fact of where it came from, the fact that it was based on Asian sizing and not American sizing.
American gluttony, yes. But it fits her great. I mean, and she looks good in it, but I can see where if they were to see that now, they would say you were trying to pass as a man.
They'd also have a fit that I'm in jeans.
Very much so. Very much so.
They'd be happy that they're down to my ankles.
Yeah.
But the fact that I'm in bipedal clothing.
Right.
That wasn't invented for women until, I believe, time of Civil War.
No, not even then. Not really. Not even then as much. Coco's like, this country has morality?
We like to think we do, but
Well, there
we have certain levels of morality.
There are those of us who hold to a certain moral code, and then there are those who
Blow it all off.
Blow it all off. Exactly. Very well put.
Yeah, there are those of us that stick to a certain code, and there are those of us that stick to anarchy and do what they want when they want. Is that kind of sum it up?
That sums it up. But I really kind of wanted to cover, and these are brief snippets, because one of the things about Margaret Cohen that I found kind of Corbin, excuse me, I said Cohen, but I meant Corbin, that I found interesting was, all right, she was born in Franklin County, Pennsylvania in 1751. Margaret was orphaned at the age of 5 after her father was killed in an Indian raid and her mother was taken captive. Now, I would have thought that part of Pennsylvania would have been, by 1751, might have been a little more settled than it was, I guess. But I guess that was still considered frontier country at that point. I just found it odd that
in Western Pennsylvania was it?
They were in Franklin County, is all it said. I'm not sure where Franklin County is in reference.
Map.
Yeah. She did, by the way, marry John in 1772. So that was a good 4 years before the Battle of New York, the Fort Washington in New York. And they did have one child, Abigail.
Yeah, I have that Mary Ludwig Hayes was born October 13th of 54. 1754, that is. Actually, the historians argue where she was born. But that was either in Philadelphia or New Jersey.
Now, okay. You had brought up a point, and I'm going to do a point. You had said that if a camp woman's husband was killed, they had like 24 hours to find somebody else. And
I wasn't able to find that online.
Okay.
Because they weren't looking. I must not have been wording it right.
Right.
But when I was reenacting, I was told that the camp women had a certain length of time to do one of two things.
Prove their...
in order to stay in the camp. And that was either remarry or go to their superior officer of their camp.
Right.
And prove that they were worth keeping, that they performed a skill in a superior manner. Therefore, the camp was better off keeping them. Because again, there were waiting lists of women who wanted to be in the camps.
The reason I brought that up, by the way, was Margaret remarried after John.
Then the fact that she had the two husbands in the...
No. She remarried after... it says Margaret's second marriage. This was the title of Margaret's second marriage. After John's death, Margaret married a wounded soldier in 1782. Now, and he died a year later in 1783. John was killed in 1776. So that was a full, almost 6 years later? So I questioned that whole 24-hour period. That's why I was
Right.
curious.
Well, again, if she could prove her value to the camp,
Well, I think she had done more than that by
yes,
cracking off that cracking off that cannon like she was
yeah.
doing.
I mean, well, for example, right here, Hayes allegedly solidified her legacy as an American hero on that date in June 28th of 1778. So I would imagine that if she secured her legacy as a hero, she probably secured her legacy of staying in the camp.
I'm sure. Yeah, it just that seeing the discrepancy in the timeline was what brought that to.
Now, I find this interesting. Historians report that about 50 soldiers died of thirst and dehydration on that day.
Maybe give away peace.
As many men died from heat exhaustion as did from gunfire.
And a lot of them died from dysentery.
Well, but
that was because they didn't have the clean water.
Right. It says that she went back and forth into battle to bring water to thirsty soldiers from a nearby spring.
Okay, so
she stayed on the battlefield bringing water and carrying wounded soldiers until her own husband got hurt.
Coco, your comment about giving away pizzas. Yeah, I had similar thought when she was talking about a superior skill.
No.
And for those of you who know, you know, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
No, a superior skill, as in she was talented at sewing or her nursing.
I know, but
yes. As far as that goes, if the men wanted a little company,
yeah,
and it was a little late in the pay cycle,
right,
they would secure the company with a military button from their uniform. And in
order to get the button back, they'd have to bring the cash.
Pay.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Because the person who accepted the button, knew they were gonna get.
Yeah, because those buttons were made out of brass, and brass was.
It wasn't just that. Military.
Yeah.
You're going to get that button back, because if you don't,
but
you're going to pay for it in.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not just talking value of the brass.
I'm not talking about the value of the brass either. I'm saying they're going to get that money back. They're going to make sure they get paid because A, it is a brass button, which is a high valued item, but B, because it was a high valued item, it had better be on your uniform.
Right. And I mean, just like your buckle better be shined.
Yep.
Yeah. Your hair better be cut just right.
All right, Mac, you have a good one, brother. You much love and thank you for joining us. Hit that like button on the way out. And by the way, excellent job on cleaning our chalkboards last week.
Thank you, Mac. There'll be a little something extra in your Easter basket.
Don't tell him that. We have to make a liquor store run.
I was thinking maybe some little chocolate liquor bottles.
Maybe.
Now, going back to Mrs. Hayes. When her husband was wounded, like we had said, she made the decision to take his place at the cannon and fire. Legend has it that George Washington asked about the courageous woman who was on the battlefield and promoted her to a non-commissioned officer.
Sergeant?
This is the reason Hayes carried the nickname Sergeant Molly.
Yeah.
William died in 1786 from his battle wounds. When he passed, he left a large amount of land to Mary.
Okay.
She later, in 1793, married John Macaulay. He was also a veteran of the American Revolution, but it is said that he spent her inheritance and then disappeared sometime after 1807.
So the man had no coup.
Yeah,
No honor.
He wasn't he a sweet cad? Hayes lived the rest of her life in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, working as a general servant and a domestic. Yeah. In 1822, the Pennsylvania State Legislature awarded her a pension of $40 per year for her service and heroism in the war. She died 10 years later in January and was buried in the Carlisle Old Graveyard. At that burial site, she is under the name Molly Macaulay, with a canyon and a statue of Molly Pitcher above her tombstone.
With a cannon, you said?
Yeah, it has a cannon and a statue above.
Okay, I thought you said canyon.
No, cannon.
And I'm like going, how did they put a canyon above her?
No, cannon.
Got it.
No. Like I said, that order to go around. Another thing with the women and marching. If the horse went lame,
they shot it and ate it.
If the horse went lame that was, for example, pulling a cannon, it was the women that then pulled the cannon.
I wasn't kidding about they shot it and ate it.
I'm sure they did, especially toward the end of the war.
Yeah. I wasn't kidding.
But, yeah, the women then pulled the cannon. It became their responsibility.
You guess you just never know. That's something I learned. I didn't know that the women were pulled the cannons if the horses went lame. The horses were in. But anyway, that's.
Yeah, so like I said, as far as Washington goes, he recognized that if he did not give reasonable provisions to the, quote, extra women in these regiments, he risked losing by desertion, perhaps to the enemy, some of the oldest and best soldiers in the service.
It was possible. A lot of them, I mean, you only had like, was it 3% of people who were behind the pro-revolution, I guess.
I don't recall seeing numbers or anything,
that was something I learned years ago.
They were washerwomen for enlisted men and officers, which of course was essential for hygiene and prevention of communicable diseases. They also, as far as their families go,
Right.
that was a way to make a little extra money.
Yeah.
Because, they were able to at least occasionally pick up some extra laundry work as long as it wasn't regulated by the unit that they accompanied. Um, with the cooking and the nursing.
And the nursing and the cooking and Coco said she'd rather do laundry.
Just don't make me hand wash dishes with lemon scented soap.
Why?
I do not like the smell of lemon scented dish soap if I'm hand washing dishes.
This is where we differ. I prefer lemon scented to non-lemon scented, but
I
love the dishwasher more than you do.
I'm talking hand wash.
Yes, I know.
Let's see. By the winter of 1777,
yeah,
around 2,000 women marched with our troops and worked as seamstresses, nurses, and cooks.
2,000 women. Huh.
Many of the women that followed the army were widows, runaway servants, or those facing poverty because of the war, as well as, of course, the wives or girlfriends of our soldiers.
Huh. That makes me wonder, and I'm not trying to be crass.
Mm-hmm.
When I bring this up, that makes me wonder how many of them were ladies of the night, shall we say, that were making extra money from.
Oh, that was beyond frowned upon within the camp.
I mean, it is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, profession.
Yes, I understand that, but you best not be caught doing that, to put it mildly. Congress in 1777 actually authorized nurses with the Continental Army to be paid $8 per month.
Okay.
So, and of the duties in the encampments, serving as nurses was particularly unpleasant.
I'll bet. I mean, you figure how many of them. I mean, a lot of them weren't trying to save the wound, save the limb that was shot. It was
saving the man.
Yeah, I mean,
mostly it was fighting disease.
Yeah,
gangrene and dysentery, and Washington recruited within
$5 sparkles
and outside the camps.
Coco chimes in with $5 sparkles. That's probably. Never mind. I'm not going there. I'm gonna behave. Stop it, Coco. You're gonna get me to go down a rabbit trail that I'm not gonna do. Nope, not doing it. So, anyway,
the camp followers, pretty much the same as the enlisted men, were, quote, on the strength of the army, and they were issued wages and rations for their work. So this was a bone of contention for the resource-scarce army.
I can imagine. You're out there fighting and scrapping, and I'm not saying the women weren't doing their fair share. Don't hear that. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I could see where the men who were out there being shot at on a regular would have some resentment.
That just scared me.
I'm sorry. That was a notification. Yeah, which isn't even up right now, which is odd.
Notification from it.
Probably, yeah. $5 sparkles. Yeah. Now my question is, if it's a $5 sparkle, is she wearing sparkles, or I mean, what are we talking here? Because I'm not interested, but somebody on the Rewind crew might be, and they might take her up on it. I would advise against it.
Now, another draw for the women to be involved. That was security.
Yeah.
Security, shelter, and food. So these runaway servants, these widows, and these poverty-stricken women, because the war had done whatever, that was probably the only way they could see to get support to keep them alive.
Yep. Okay.
Washington was irritated with the influx of the followers. He asserted in August of 77 general orders that the multitude, quote, the multitude of women in particular, especially those who are pregnant or have children, are a clog upon every movement.
I can imagine.
His commands often did not treat camp followers differently than any other members of his ranks, and he expressed a desire to acquaint women with, quote, sergeants of the companies to communicate all orders of that nature to them.
Huh. So they were given the same.
But he was more familiar with the Virginia gentry.
Yeah.
And the women in the camps were not of that ilk.
No, they weren't.
The behavior of some of these women did include stealing, prostitution, and disobeying orders. In his wartime writing, he seemed perplexed by the lack of feminine virtue among the women who had integrated into the ranks of the army. During the summer of 1777, he repeatedly expressed his frustration over camp followers disobeying his orders by riding in wagons during the army's marches.
Added weight to the horses.
The wives of the enlisted men within the army also posed a morale problem for Washington. He expressed concern over limiting the number of rations for women in the winter of 1783. He recognized that if he did not give reasonable provisions to these extra women in the regiment, he risked losing the desertions like what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
He lamented that the number of women and children with the New York infantry regiments left him with the options of either circumventing the ration system, driving the excess dependents out of the camp. He believed the latter would have resulted in men abandoning the army to follow their families. So he directed that the camp followers could continue to draw rations. To him, the camp followers seemed a necessary evil rather than a vital support.
I can see that. I mean, they weren't. These are backwood and you know.
Yeah,
I'm not saying backward. I'm saying backwood. You know, meaning they weren't from the gentry.
Right. I mean, I'm not.
So they were used to doing what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it and how they wanted to do it, and not being used to military regimental life.
Not to speak ill of certain people, but there's a certain person that has been referred to tonight. You know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
And let's put her in a room with Melania.
I've got a mental image there that is hilarious. Anyway, go on. God, talk about your...
And women of that rank, and compare them.
There is no comparison. That's just disturbing.
I mean, if, I mean, Trump, for example, is a little more familiar with a wider variety,
Now,
I would think, than Washington probably was.
yeah, I mean,
because of what he's done outside of politics.
yeah,
Um, but take a career politician who's been doing the cocktail party circuit
God,
for 50, 60 years
right,
and put her in a room with that sort of crowd.
yeah, that would just be
Right. Same idea. But there was still an important faction here of camp followers. The wives of senior officers like Generals Nathaniel Greene and Henry Knox, for example, they accompanied their husbands during periods of low military activity. So, yeah, they weren't during necessarily the
combat phase,
right. So they weren't in as much danger.
right?
And they improved morale during the winter encampments. They also fulfilled social obligations by initiating formal and informal events. It says Catherine Greene sponsored a dance in March of 1779. Elizabeth Hamilton served tea at the New Windsor headquarters in March of 1781. And Martha Washington hosted dinners given at the Hasbrook House headquarters
Okay.
in Newburgh in 1782 and 1783. These affairs served the symbolic function of lifting men's spirits. They stood in stark contrast to the work of the majority of camp followers. I would imagine that they gave their husbands a major break from the normal rations to some real cuisine.
Maybe. I mean,
Although some of them, I'm sure, may have had their own private cooks or chefs. Sometimes considered by Washington hindrance of war efforts, women who accompanied the Continental Army served an important role in the daily operations of camp life. So they served the purpose of the background work.
right.
They needed somebody to do those jobs. It's just unfortunate in a lot of people's eyes that it was that particular demographic that was doing it.
Right. Well, I think we've pretty well covered
I think so too.
the women of the revolution, and pretty well honored the memory of Miss Molly Pitcher, whoever she may be, or whoever they may be.
Yes. Whoever contributed to the overall image that we have.
Yes. So this leads me to my closing question, since we did not discuss prior to tonight's show. And I'm going to ask, since we have 4 people in the chat and we've got at least 2 active.
Yeah, because you can't count me in that count.
No. What would you good people like to discuss for us to discuss next week? And it does not have to be history. It can be anything so long as it's Americana. We've done soda, we've done candy, we've done bank robbers, cost of eggs. No, we're not going to do. No, because that'll lead down the road of politics, and I'm not. Yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah, we avoid politics and religion, and we also avoid sport.
Unless it's someone who worships the egg. We might discuss someone who worships the egg.
Worships the egg?
Never mind. It's
as far as the eggs go, we can talk about how that can be used. Well, that wouldn't be discussing religion, but we could, they have been used. Eggs have been used to explain the idea of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
So is the shamrock. We've already discussed that part.
Totally different approaches, though.
I rewatched, as I've said. I don't know if I said it on this chat. I know I said it to you earlier, but I rewatched our fishing chat again, and we had a lot of fun with that. So I'd like to go down. We've had fishing stories.
Coco says mafia.
In what aspect? We
did touch on that.
We did touch on the mafia with the. You say it.
Lufthansa heist.
The Lufthansa heist.
She says differences between Irish and Italian.
You know what? I like that idea actually, and it is the end of March, which is Irish Heritage Month. That does actually. That we could tie that in.
Neither of us are Italian.
No, but
so who's gonna take what side?
Oh, you're not Irish. You're Scottish. Although you've had a little Irish in you. But anyway.
My DNA tells me that I have people with my similar DNA in the history that have lived in Ireland. Belfast and such. But I suppose I'll give.
I'm the one wearing Celtic mud on my arm for the rest of my life. I get
Scottish.
Irish.
Is Celtic.
It is. It's one of the. It is one of the six
Celtic nations.
It is one of the 6 Celtic nations. You are correct.
But I will acquiesce. Italian.
Mingo.
In honor of a certain beautiful best friend of mine in northern.
That's what I thought. Yeah. I didn't know she was Italian.
I believe so with her maiden name. I don't want to dox her, so
no.
I will tell you.
Yes, after the show. So, yes, that is what we will be discussing. We will discuss the differences between the Irish mafia and the other. I'm already showing my bias. I won't even.
That's okay. I, as you know, one of my favorite movies is Goodfellas. And they, we put it politely, have strong Italian leanings.
Told by an Irishman.
Yes.
So it takes an Irishman to tell a good.
2 of the main characters were Irish, therefore they could not be made men.
It took an Irishman to tell you an Italian story.
That's only because he turned state's evidence.
And well, that's because they tried to kill him or were threatening to kill him.
They were going to, yeah.
Yeah. So it was self-preservation. So we now have next week's topic. Thank you to Coco and Field Artillery. My father would be proud. Just to see the cross.
Fear with that, Coco, is that's going to be way more information than we can do in our time limit, in our time frame. Not that we have a tight
Like,
scheduled. But she's saying we could also include others like the German and.
Well, I tell you what, we could extend it for. I mean, it's not like we've never. I mean, it's not like this one hasn't already gone.
And we can always do more than one night.
Yeah, we.
Night, Carl. Sweet dreams, honey.
Carl out.
Carl says, "Okay, good night, all."
Guten Abend. Yeah, we can do that.
Buenas noches.
We can do that. So we now have next week's topic picked. We're going to compare La Cosa Nostra to the Irish mob.
That's just the La Costa Nostra.
La Cosa Nostra is this thing of ours, which is what the Italians call their life. The Italian mob calls their lifestyle.
And you said versus the Italian mob.
The Irish mob.
Okay, that's
the Irish mob.
Oh, we'll come up with all sorts of interesting things between the two of those opposing sides. Let's say.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Whitey Bulger. There were,
Scotty.
huh? I could. You know what? Yeah, but there were several others before that were very interesting. That yeah. So there's definitely.
Yeah, I agree there, Coco. The Italian and the Irish did work closely together. But if you were not pure of one or the other, you could not be accepted fully and made.
Like I could never be made.
Neither could I.
I could never be made.
If I had been male. I do think it's interesting that they have looked at things, and there's a lot of the women who have things in their name and are controlling things because the men are on a long-term vacation at Club Med, for example.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Cool, Coco. Grandfather made in Mafia.
Okay.
I can't say that about my ancestry to my knowledge.
I'm gonna just.
I'm
just.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We'll Coco. We'll talk. Maybe we'll do an interview. I don't know.
And oh no, Coco, we would never ask you to give a name. Oh no.
Oh heck no. No.
But
No.
Carl put a link.
I see that.
Urban Dictionary in here.
Uh-oh.
I'm a little scared as to what word we're defining at Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, what are we defining there,
Carl?
Yeah, I started to use the screen name.
The field artillery?
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what that flag is. I just
What Carl's?
It. Yeah.
That is the field artillery. That's
a field. Okay.
That's the cross cannons.
Oh, apparently.
Of the field artillery.
E4 Mafia.
Oh yeah. That's not the E4 Mafia. That's the field artillery cannons, but I know about the E4 Mafia.
I think that's what maybe Blink is for.
Oh, okay. The E4 Mafia.
It's a thing.
Oh, I know. I know.
You have the chat.
No, yeah, I'm in the chat, but I know the E4 Mafia is a thing. I grew up in a Navy town with a father who was in the Army.
Coco says that would be cool to talk about too. I don't know anything about it, so I'd be doing serious research.
Well, the market.
That would have to probably wait until May, mid to late May.
Mid to late May.
Late May, because we know what's going on in May.
Yes. Speaking of, yes.
Yeah, we got to figure out some people.
Yeah.
And thanks to a certain photographer,
Yes.
I may have something someone can do, since it doesn't look like someone would be there.
Okay.
Sorry, not to sound cryptic, folks.
Yeah, I would. We could do. You know, we won't do the E4 Mafia discussion this coming week. I really do like the idea of the Irish mob versus, in comparison. Let's do comparisons, not versus, because I'm not trying to. No, we're not trying to start anything.
No.
We'll the differences between the two. There we go.
Yeah.
What were the differences?
Compare and contrast.
Yes.
Yeah,
Outstanding. And I thank you all for that.
yes, I see we have 8.
Yes.
It does include me, but
Yeah.
so there are 7 others in here right now. And we're thankful for all of you. And of course, we're thankful for everyone on the Rewind crew as
absolutely.
Well.
In fact, I believe my my lymphedema PT physical therapist may be joining the Rewind crew. Possibly.
She sent me a message saying thank you.
Oh, okay, cool. Good deal. Yes, I went and had the legs worked on today with the lymphedema. So we were discussing the channel with her, and she said she might try to pop in and give us a listen to. So, but anyway, folks, that is the show for this week. I want to express my gratitude for all of you who are here, and for those of you who have come and left, like Mac. I know.
Coco is asking if they're getting better.
Yes, they are. They are definitely. She has noted. That's what I'm trying to say. A severe decrease. Now, one of the legs, the upper.
I wouldn't say severe. Say serious.
Serious. You're right. You're right.
A noticeable.
There we go. A noticeable decrease. That's probably the
noticeable difference.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say decrease in
size.
In size.
Okay.
Yeah. Good night, Carl. But yes, they are getting better for sure.
Yes, a noticeable improvement.
There we go. But so we will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And as always, I am going to give Mrs. Mutt the last word.
Have fun storming the castle.